I am Mark, and my life is a symphony of keystrokes and the faint, persistent hum of fluorescent lights. 43 years old, and my primary contribution to the world is the meticulous, soul-numbing transfer of data from paper to pixel. My current arena is Cubicle 3B in the Accounts Payable Department, a beige purgatory where the most exciting event of the week is the arrival of the Friday donut box. This particular Tuesday, a Tuesday that felt indistinguishable from any other Tuesday that had preceded it, I found myself staring at a spreadsheet, the cursor blinking a relentless rhythm that mirrored the dull ache behind my eyes. The office itself is a vast, open-plan expanse, a sea of identical partitions designed for maximum efficiency and, I suspect, minimum personal space. The air, perpetually recycled, carries a peculiar blend of stale coffee, the sharp tang of toner from the communal printer, and something else, something vaguely organic that I've never quite been able to place. My cubicle, a cramped alcove of forced isolation, is my domain. It's a space defined by stacks of invoices, a perpetually half-empty mug stained with the ghosts of countless coffees, and a chaotic constellation of post-it notes plastered onto the partition, each bearing a cryptic reminder or a half-formed thought. The thin walls offer little in the way of true privacy, yet they create a potent illusion of it, a fragile barrier against the constant, low-level murmur of colleagues and the distant rumble of city traffic that seeps through the tinted windows. My days unfold with an almost agonizing predictability. The alarm clock's insistent chirping at 6:15 a.m., the hurried shower, the lukewarm coffee brewed in a pot that's seen better decades, the drive through the muted dawn, the ritualistic parking of my sensible sedan, and then the slow walk across the polished linoleum to my designated cubicle. The office itself is a monument to beige and muted gray, a landscape designed to inspire neither joy nor dread, merely passive existence. The constant low thrum of the ventilation system is the soundtrack to my professional life, punctuated by the rhythmic click-clack of keyboards, the occasional muffled cough, and the distant percussive whir of the photocopier. The scent of stale coffee is a constant companion, an olfactory anchor in this sea of sameness. Even the sunlight, when it manages to penetrate the grime-streaked windows, seems to arrive filtered and weary. My desk, a battlefield of paper and forgotten stationery, is a testament to my dedication, or perhaps my inability to let go of even the most trivial of items. A worn, ergonomic mousepad, a perpetually smudged monitor, a pen holder overflowing with dried-out markers. These are the artifacts of my existence. The sheer, unassailable normalcy of it all is, in its own way, a comfort. It began subtly, as these things always do. A stapler, which I distinctly remembered placing precisely in the center of my desk, was now sitting a good 3 inches to the left. I blinked, dismissing it as a moment of absent-mindedness, a consequence of staring at numbers for too long. Then a pen cap vanished. Not the pen, just the cap, leaving the ink exposed to the dry office air. Again, I chided myself. Stress, lack of sleep, the usual suspects. But there was also a faint, inexplicable chill that seemed to emanate from the corner of my cubicle, a pocket of cold air that defied the office thermostat's dutiful whirring. I'd rub my arms, attributing it to a draft from the air conditioning, though I couldn't pinpoint any source. It was just a feeling, a slight prickle on the back of my neck that I could easily explain away with logic and a firm grip on reality. My mind, trained in the precise world of data entry, was adept at finding rational explanations for even the most fleeting anomalies. The whispers started then, soft as rustling silk, always just at the periphery of my hearing. When I was alone, or believed myself to be, they were indistinct, a murmur of voices too low to decipher, too fleeting to grasp. I'd strain my ears, turning my head, only for the sound to vanish, leaving behind an unnerving silence. Then came the shadows, quick, darting movements at the very edge of my vision, like startled birds. When I'd whip my head around, they'd be gone, leaving only the sterile glare of the fluorescent lights. The unease began to coil in my gut, a tight knot of apprehension. One afternoon, Nestled amongst my invoices, I found it. A single, tarnished, old-fashioned thimble. It was heavy, made of metal, and utterly alien to my world. I'd never owned a thimble, never even thought about them. And with it, a faint, almost imperceptible scent of lavender. It was a scent that tugged at a distant memory, a scent I hadn't encountered in years, but one that was undeniably familiar. It was the scent of my grandmother's linen closet, a place of quiet, dusty comfort. The whispers grew bolder, no longer just unintelligible murmurs, but sometimes chillingly a soft, drawn-out whisper of my name, my Ark. The shadows, too, began to coalesce, forming a vague, hunched shape that would flicker in my peripheral vision. A phantom figure always dissolving into nothingness the moment I tried to focus on it. I brought in a framed photograph of my wife and kids, a vibrant splash of color against the beige, hoping to anchor myself, to reclaim my space, but even that felt off. The edges of the frame seemed to shift, the smiles on their faces appearing subtly strained. Then one morning, I found my own meticulous notes, scrawled in my own hand, partially obscured by unfamiliar, shaky script, words I didn't recognize, written in a cramped, almost childlike hand. The air in my cubicle felt thick, heavy, as if the very particles of dust were coalescing into a tangible presence. The thimble, that alien artifact, felt cold and unnervingly smooth in my palm. The whispers were no longer at the edge of hearing, but seemed to emanate from within the partition itself, a low, sibilant chorus that spoke of things I couldn't comprehend. The hunched figure, no longer a fleeting shadow, now seemed to linger, a dark stain at the periphery of my sight, its form solidifying just enough to suggest a presence, something ancient and malevolent. My heart hammered against my ribs, a frantic, trapped bird. I fumbled for my phone, my fingers clumsy and slick with sweat, but as I brought it to my ear, the screen flickered, then went black. The lavender scent, once faint, now hung heavy in the air, cloying and suffocating, mixed with a new, acrid undertone that made my eyes water. Then, from the empty chair beside my desk, a hand, impossibly thin and skeletal, reached out, its fingers brushing against my own. This place, this ordinary, unassuming office, it's a cage. And sometimes the bars aren't made of metal, but of routine, of expectation, of the belief that nothing truly terrible can happen when the lights are on and the coffee is brewing. But it can. It's already here, and it waits. I'm David, and I'm an accountant. My life is built on numbers, on balance sheets and predictable columns. This house, this beige box of a home built in the late 70s, is my sanctuary, a testament to a life meticulously accounted for. It's a 2-bedroom suburban dwelling, the kind that blends seamlessly into a street of similar structures, punctuated by slightly overgrown lawns and the occasional faded child's bicycle left carelessly by the curb. Inside, it's a landscape of comfortable disarray, the quiet accumulation of years. The living room, my current command center, is a testament to this. Stacks of financial journals teeter precariously on the coffee table. A half-finished crossword puzzle lies abandoned, and a worn throw blanket is perpetually draped over the arm of my recliner. I'm here, in this familiar clutter, because it's my haven. My children have long since flown the nest, seeking their own spreadsheets and futures, and my wife Eleanor has been gone for 5 quiet years. So the evenings are mine, a vast expanse of silence punctuated only by the flickering glow of the television and the comforting, if slightly dusty, presence of my belongings. The isolation here isn't a choice, not entirely. It's a consequence, a natural settling after the storms of life have passed, leaving behind a stillness that can be both profound and, at times, a little too deep. My days unfold with the practiced rhythm of a well-oiled ledger. I wake at precisely 6:30 a.m., the digital clock on my bedside table a steadfast sentinel. The first act of my day is always to prepare coffee, the rich, dark aroma of it filling the kitchen, a scent that has become as integral to my mornings as the soft, worn linoleum underfoot. I'll often stand by the window, mug warming my hands, watching the faint, early commuter traffic begin its slow crawl down Elm Street, a distant, low rumble that serves as the city's quiet breath. The refrigerator, a hulking white appliance in the corner, emits its steady, mechanical hum, a constant, unobtrusive companion. Evenings are a mirror of the mornings, a gentle winding down. Dinner is typically something simple, prepared and eaten in the quiet solitude of the dining room, the clink of my fork against the ceramic plate a solitary sound. Then it's back to the living room, to the comforting weight of the throw blanket, the muted glow of the television, and the familiar, almost comforting scent of stale coffee and faintly new carpet from a long-ago renovation. This predictability, this unbroken chain of ordinary moments, is the bedrock of my existence. It's a life so thoroughly grounded in the mundane that any deviation feels like an earthquake. It started subtly, a whisper against the solid facade of my routine. I remember distinctly closing the pantry door after retrieving a can of soup. Later, I found it hanging open, a dark sliver of emptiness inviting my gaze. I chalked it up to a faulty latch, perhaps a bump from my own passing. Then, a few nights later, I distinctly recall switching off the hall light before heading to bed. The familiar click of the switch a small, satisfying punctuation mark to the day. Yet, upon reaching the bedroom, I saw it. A faint, ethereal glow emanating from the hallway. The light was on. My mind, ever logical, supplied the answer. Simple forgetfulness. My memory, perhaps not as sharp as it once was, playing tricks. I shook my head, a dismissive gesture, and returned to the hall to extinguish the offending bulb, telling myself I needed more sleep, that my eyes were playing tricks in the dim light. The rationalizations, however, began to feel a little too rehearsed, a little too desperate. The disturbances, once dismissed as minor lapses, began to weave a more unsettling tapestry. The car keys, which I habitually placed on the small ceramic dish by the front door, were found one morning nestled in the chilled interior of the refrigerator, nestled between a carton of milk and a half-eaten jar of pickles. My reading glasses, always folded neatly on the bedside table, reappeared days later tucked away in a kitchen cupboard alongside the seldom-used fondue set. Then came the puddles, small, inexplicable ellipses of moisture, dark against the beige carpet, appearing in the middle of the living room floor, then the hallway. They smelled faintly of damp earth, a cloying organic odor that was entirely alien to the dry, air-conditioned environment of my home. And the scent, oh, the scent. It was a sickly, sweet floral perfume, an overpowering, cloying fragrance that would bloom unexpectedly in the air, only to vanish as quickly, leaving behind a faint, phantom sweetness that made my gorge rise. I found myself constantly checking door latches, scrutinizing light switches, my heart beginning to beat a little faster, a frantic drum against my ribs. The feeling of being watched, a prickling sensation on the back of my neck, became a constant companion, a silent observer in my own sanctuary. Sleep offered little respite, my nights punctuated by the low hum of anxiety that seemed to emanate from the very walls. Then came the night. I was jolted awake by a sound, a soft, melodic cadence that pulled me from a deep, troubled sleep. It was a lullaby, a tune I hadn't heard in years, a melody Eleanor used to sing to our youngest daughter. It was coming from down the hall, from the room that had once been hers, now a quiet repository of forgotten dolls and faded posters. My breath hitched. My heart hammered against my ribs, a frantic, desperate rhythm. I swung my legs out of bed, the floorboards cool beneath my bare feet. Each step toward the door was a Herculean effort, my muscles stiff with an unseen terror. The humming continued, a soft, melancholic echo in the oppressive silence of the house. As my hand reached for the doorknob, the humming abruptly ceased. An absolute, profound silence descended, thicker and more terrifying than any sound. The house remains, its beige siding a bland testament to normalcy. The lawn still needs tending. But the silence is different now. It doesn't offer peace, only a watchful emptiness. The numbers on my ledger are meaningless. This isn't forgetfulness. This is something else. Something that has taken root in the mundane, and it waits. Be careful what you dismiss as a trick of the mind. The ordinary can be the most terrifying place of all. My hands ache with the phantom pressure of a pallet jack's worn grip. Even now, hours after my shift has ended, I'm Michael, 28, and my life has revolved around the fluorescent glare and the endless, silent aisles of the city's largest supermarket for the past 3 years. It's a job that demands little and offers even less, save for the stale air and the rhythmic squeak of my worn-out sneakers on linoleum. Tonight, like most nights, the store is a cavern of muted blues and greens under the relentless, buzzing hum of the lights. It's past midnight. The city outside a distant thrum, and the chill of the air conditioning, designed to preserve mountains of produce, seeps into my bones. A constant, unwelcome companion. The shelves meticulously stocked by me and the few other souls brave enough to work the graveyard shift stand like silent sentinels. Their contents a riot of manufactured color, a testament to a world that never truly sleeps, even when I desperately wish it would. My routine is a well-worn groove: unload the trucks, break down boxes with a practiced, almost brutal efficiency, and then the slow, methodical dance of filling the shelves. The smell of disinfectant, a sharp, clean scent that never quite masks the underlying aroma of ripe fruit and aging cardboard, is my constant perfume. I push the pallet jack, its wheels groaning a familiar song, down aisle 6, the canned vegetables a gleaming expanse of metal. The low mechanical murmur of the refrigeration units in the dairy section is a constant drone, punctuated only by the soft rustle of plastic wrap as I rearrange a display of soup cans. There's a predictable calm to it all, a comforting, almost oppressive normalcy. The distant, muffled rumble of urban traffic is a lullaby, a reminder of the world outside this controlled environment, a world that feels impossibly far away in the echoing silence of the empty store. It started subtly, a prickle of unease that I, in my exhaustion, easily dismissed. A can of diced tomatoes I'd placed squarely in the center of the shelf would be found nestled amongst the pasta sauce, its label facing the wrong direction. Then a box of cereal, perfectly aligned, would be askew, as if someone had nudged it with a careless elbow. I'd chalk it up to my own fatigue, to the vast, empty space playing tricks on my eyes, making me second-guess my own actions. The sheer monotony of the tasks, the hours spent in solitary communion with inanimate objects, could easily lead to a wandering mind, a misplaced sense of reality. I'd blink, rub my eyes, and then meticulously reposition the offending item, muttering to myself about needing more sleep, about how the fluorescent lights could play havoc with your perception. But then the whispers began, or what I perceived as whispers, faint and indistinct, like the echo of laughter from a distant party I wasn't invited to. They'd seem to emanate from the dark recesses behind the towering shelves, from the empty corners where shadows pooled and deepened. And sometimes, a distinct, high-pitched whirring sound, the unmistakable activation of a child's toy, would cut through the quiet, only to cease as quickly as it began, leaving me scanning the empty aisles, my breath catching in my throat. It was then that the shoes started appearing. Small, worn, scuffed children's shoes tucked away in the most improbable places, a little red sneaker peeking out from behind a stack of toilet paper, a tiny blue sandal nestled amongst the bags of chips. Each discovery sent a fresh wave of cold dread through me, a visceral reaction that sleep deprivation couldn't quite explain away. The automatic doors at the front of the store, a gateway to the outside world, would sometimes sigh open and then shut, their sensors inexplicably triggered, even when no one was there to pass through. I'd feel sudden, localized pockets of intense cold, as if a phantom breath had passed over my skin, even as the store's climate control maintained its steady, artificial chill. One night, while meticulously arranging cans of peaches, I caught a flicker of movement in the polished linoleum floor, a fleeting reflection of a small child, no older than 5, with dark hair and wide, curious eyes. I snapped my head up, my heart hammering against my ribs. But the floor was empty, reflecting only the sterile overhead lights. The unease solidified into a gnawing fear. The feeling of being watched became a constant, suffocating pressure. The shadows in the aisles seemed to deepen, to writhe with a life of their own, and the familiar hum of the store transformed into a chorus of insidious whispers. The toys, when they activated, seemed to play a mocking, disjointed melody, and the shoes became more frequent, appearing closer to me, sometimes just a few feet away, as if placed there deliberately. I started to avoid certain aisles, the ones where the cold spots lingered, where the whispers seemed strongest. My sleep became a battlefield of fragmented nightmares, my waking hours consumed by a gnawing paranoia. I'd jump at every creak of the floorboards, every distant clatter, my mind a frantic loop of rationalizations that were rapidly losing their grip. I was trapped in this brightly lit, sterile purgatory, my sanctuary of normalcy a crumbling facade. Then, one evening, as I was restocking the baby formula, the air grew heavy, thick with an invisible presence. The fluorescent lights flickered erratically, casting long distorted shadows that writhed like living things. A child's giggle, sharp and clear, echoed from the end of the aisle. I froze, my breath catching in my throat, my body rigid with a primal terror. I turned slowly, my eyes scanning the empty space. And there, standing at the far end of the aisle, was a small figure, indistinct in the flickering light, its form shimmering like heat haze. It was a child, its small hands outstretched, a worn red sneaker clutched in one. Then, with a sickening lurch, it began to move towards me, not walking but gliding, its tiny feet not seeming to touch the floor. My scream caught in my throat, a strangled gasp of pure, unadulterated horror. I fled. I ran, my pallet jack abandoned, my mind a white-hot inferno of panic. I didn't stop until I burst through the emergency exit, gasping for air in the cool night breeze. I never went back. The horror isn't in the dark or the unknown. It's in the mundane, the familiar, the places we think are safe. It's in the sterile aisles, the humming refrigerators, the endless shelves. And it waits. It waits for the lonely, for the tired, for anyone who might mistake its presence for their own exhaustion. Be careful where you find your solace. I'm Robert, and this is the part of my week that feels like slipping into a well-worn armchair. Every Tuesday, I haul my laundry basket down to the corner laundromat. It's a place of quiet ritual, a sanctuary of sorts from the echoing silence of my house since Martha passed. The machines here, a chorus of whirring and tumbling, are a familiar soundscape, a gentle hum that drowns out the louder anxieties. The air is thick with the clean, sharp scent of detergent, a comforting chemical perfume that clings to everything, a testament to the ordinary. It's a functional isolation, a place where people come to tend to their domestic needs, often with their heads down, lost in their own thoughts, or the sterile glow of their phones. My routine is as predictable as the spin cycle. I sort my whites from my colors, carefully loading the machines, making sure not to overstuff them. The steady, distant rumble of urban traffic is a constant, a low thrum beneath the closer mechanical whines. The fluorescent lights above cast a sterile, unwavering glow, reflecting off the linoleum floor that's seen better decades. The faint, metallic tang of old coins sometimes mingles with the detergent, a ghost of transactions past. I've been coming here for years, watching the seasons change outside the grimy windows, the same faces occasionally reappearing, a nod of recognition, nothing more. It's a predictable calm, a world measured in cycles of wash and dry, a comforting rhythm that lulls the mind into a state of quiet contentment. It started subtly, as I suppose these things always do. One Tuesday, tucked amongst my neatly folded towels, I found a single tiny sock. It was a child's sock, a soft, pale blue with a faded cartoon character I didn't recognize. I chalked it up to a mix-up, a stray item left behind by a previous patron. Sloppy work, I muttered to myself, tossing it into the lost and found bin that perpetually overflowed with forgotten treasures. Then, a week later, a delicate, lace-trimmed handkerchief appeared with my sheets. This time, I felt a prickle of unease. I'm meticulous with my laundry, always double-checking before I fold. It was too strange to be a simple oversight. Perhaps, I reasoned, it was a momentary lapse in my usual attention. The mind plays tricks when you're alone too much, I told myself, the echoes of Martha's laughter a distant, mournful memory. The occurrences, however, refused to remain discreet. The washing machine I always favored, the one by the far wall, began to behave erratically. It would start its cycle with a sudden jarring hum, even when I hadn't pressed a button, only to grind to a halt mid-spin, leaving my clothes in a soggy, tangled mess. I'd stand there, bewildered, checking the plug, the water supply, my own sanity. Then came the whispers, faint, indistinct murmurs that seemed to emanate from the empty dryers, like secrets shared on the wind. At first, I dismissed them as the building settling, the wind whistling through unseen cracks, but they grew, insistent, almost pleading, and with them, a new scent began to infiltrate the familiar detergent aroma, the cloying, damp smell of turned earth, of things long buried. One Tuesday, the small whiteboard, usually scrawled with the faded warnings of broken machines, bore a new addition, a series of crude, childlike drawings. Stick figures with unnervingly large eyes stared out from the chipped surface, their expressions vacant. I knew with a certainty that chilled me to the bone that I hadn't drawn them. And then, the locket. Tangled in the folds of a bedsheet, a small, tarnished, silver locket. My fingers trembled as I pried it open. Inside, a faded sepia photograph of a young girl, her hair in pigtails, her eyes, impossibly dark and deep, seemed to fix directly on mine, a silent accusation. The laundromat, once my haven, had become a stage for a silent, insidious play. The whispers grew bolder, coalescing into what sounded like faint, desperate pleas. The smell of damp earth was now a constant companion, clinging to my clothes, to my skin, a suffocating shroud. I found myself staring at the empty machines, half expecting them to spring to life, half dreading it. Paranoia became my shadow. Every creak of the floorboards, every flicker of the fluorescent lights, sent a jolt of adrenaline through me. Sleep offered no respite. The girl's eyes from the locket haunted my dreams, her silent gaze a constant, accusatory presence. I started to believe I was being watched, not by the other patrons, but by something unseen, something that had attached itself to this mundane place, to me. The familiar thrum of the machines now sounded like a heartbeat, a slow, heavy pulse that echoed the growing dread in my own chest. One Tuesday, as I reached for a freshly dried towel, my hand brushed against something cold and small. It was a single child's shoe, impossibly tiny, made of a dark, stiff material that felt disturbingly like dried mud. As I looked at it, a faint, cold breath ghosted across my cheek, and the girl's face, no longer sepia-toned but starkly, terrifyingly real, materialized in the swirling lint of the dryer. Her mouth opened, and for the first time a sound emerged. A thin, reedy cry that clawed at my eardrums, a sound of profound, unending sorrow. My heart hammered against my ribs, a frantic drumbeat against the encroaching silence. My legs refused to move, my breath caught in my throat. The laundromat is still there, the machines still hum. But now, when I go, I don't see the quiet solitude. I see the shadows, I hear the whispers, and I feel the eyes. Be careful where you seek comfort in the mundane, for sometimes the most ordinary places hold the deepest darkness, and the things we try to wash away can never truly be cleaned. I am Gary. For 30 years, this place, Gary's Hardware and Supply, has been my universe. It's a small, independent hardware store tucked into a modest strip mall, the kind of place that smells perpetually of raw lumber, sharp metallic tangs, and the faint, sweet decay of spilled paint. My father built it, brick by dusty brick, and I inherited the worn wooden counter, the towering shelves packed tight with everything from gleaming new power drills to bags of Well, whatever people need to fix their leaky faucets or build their decks. My days are a predictable rhythm of recommending the right gauge of wire, explaining the subtle differences between wood screws, and the quiet satisfaction of a neatly organized aisle. Today, like most days, is a Tuesday, the kind of Tuesday that bleeds into Wednesday without much fanfare. The fluorescent lights hum a low, steady drone, a constant companion to the distant murmur of traffic from the highway cutting through the suburban sprawl. My mornings begin before the sun truly asserts itself, a deliberate ritual of unlocking the heavy glass door, the metallic scrape of the deadbolt a familiar prelude. I'll turn on the main lights, the hum intensifying, and then I'll brew a pot of coffee, the rich, dark aroma mingling with the store's inherent scents. I walk the aisles, my fingers tracing the cool metal of tool handles, the rough grain of lumber stacked high. The click of the cash register drawer opening and closing, the rustle of plastic bags, the low thrum of the ancient refrigerator in the back room where we keep the small selection of plumbing fixtures. These are the sounds that define my existence. Customers come and go, their needs practical, their problems solvable with the right bolt, the right sealant. There's a comforting predictability to it all, a sense of grounded reality in the tangible nature of the goods I sell. The world outside might be chaotic, but in here, order prevails. Or at least, it always has. It started subtly, so much so that I dismissed it as a trick of the light, or more likely, my own mind playing games. A hammer, I was certain I'd placed on the third peg from the left, would be on the second. A box of drywall screws, neatly aligned, would be askew, as if nudged by an invisible hand. I'd chalk it up to a customer carelessly browsing, or the slight tremor of my own hand as I reached for something. My memory, I'd tell myself, isn't what it used to be. I'd retrace my steps, my gaze sweeping over the familiar merchandise, and find no logical explanation. It was just off. A fleeting sensation of something being out of place, a whisper of discord in the symphony of the ordinary. Then came the keys, small, intricately wrought antique house keys, not the modern, mass-produced kind, tucked inside brand-new boxes of standard deadbolts. I'd open them, ready to stock, and there they'd be, nestled amongst the gleaming tumblers, keys that belonged to a different era, a different lock. The faint scent of pipe tobacco, a ghost of my father's habit, started to drift through the aisles, particularly strong near his old, scarred workbench in the back. It was a scent I hadn't consciously registered in years, and its sudden reappearance felt like a deliberate intrusion. Sometimes, in the polished chrome of a new faucet or the glass of a display case, I'd catch a flicker of movement, a brief reflection of a man in an old-fashioned canvas apron, always gone when I turned my head. The logical part of me, the part that understood torque and tensile strength, fought against it, constructing elaborate scenarios involving reflections from the street or optical illusions born of fatigue. But a colder, deeper dread was beginning to coil in my gut. The silence of the back storage room, usually a comforting quiet, began to feel pregnant with sound. It wasn't a loud noise, not at first. Just a faint scuffing, a soft rustle as if someone were moving cautiously amongst the stacks of lumber and paint cans. I'd stand at the doorway, straining my ears, the familiar smells of drying paint and old cardboard now tinged with an unsettling chill. I started locking the storage room door even when I was inside the store, the metallic click of the bolt feeling less like security and more like sealing something in. Sleep became a luxury, my nights spent staring at the ceiling of my small apartment above the shop, every creak of the building, every distant siren, amplified into a potential threat. The feeling of being watched was constant, an invisible pressure on my skin, even when I was alone, surrounded by the very tools and materials designed to build and secure. The familiar became hostile, and the mundane, my sanctuary, began to feel like a cage. One morning, the air in the store was thick with that pipe tobacco smell, overpowering the sawdust and paint. I walked to the counter, my heart hammering against my ribs, a frantic bird trapped within my chest. And there, sitting precisely in the center of the worn oak, was a small, intricately carved wooden robin, Its eyes were tiny, gleaming beads, and its wings were spread as if caught in mid-flight. It was exquisite, folk art of a kind my father adored, but it was not mine. It was not part of any order, any inventory. It was simply there. And as I reached for it, my hand trembling, I saw it again. Not a reflection this time, but a distinct, solid shape in the periphery of my vision. A man, his face obscured by shadow, wearing that old canvas apron, just standing there watching me. A strangled gasp escaped my lips as I recoiled, my legs giving out, my world tilting on its axis. The robin remains on the counter. I never touch it. The scent of pipe tobacco is a permanent fixture now, a cloying reminder, and sometimes, when the lights are low, I see him, or at least the suggestion of him, in the shadows between the aisles. You think your home, your workplace, is a haven, a place of predictable logic. But the mundane is a thin veneer. Be careful what you leave unattended, what you dismiss as a trick of the light. The ordinary can become the most terrifying place of all.